So this is part 2 of the video lessons on solving equations using multiplication and division. Now we're going to start this video lesson assuming that you have already watched and understand the lesson on using addition and subtraction for solving equations. So if you need a quick review on that, go ahead and look at that. Otherwise, let's jump straight in to this part with a review, very quick, of just that. A few important things from that lesson. First, we always have to keep the equation in balance. That means whatever we do to one side of the equation, which in this case is x plus 12, we must do to the other side of the equation to keep it in balance like a scale. We have said that these two things are equal. We cannot add 5 to one side of an equal equation without adding 5 to the other side. And that gives rise to what's called the addition and subtraction properties of inequality. Adding or subtracting the same amount, important, the same amount from each side, also important, of an equation produces an equivalent equation. That is, one with the same solution. So when we're solving equations, we can use these properties to eventually what's called isolate the variable, which is put the variable alone on one side, and solve the equation. So let's jump straight into solving then with multiplication or division, and we'll start with the idea of multiplication. Now we're going to start back the same place we did before. Remember, you must always keep this equation in balance. So that means whatever we do to one side of the equation in terms of multiplying or dividing, we must do to the other side. And we can really multiply or divide by anything that we want as long as we do the same thing to the other side. So, splitting it up like we did before, our variable is going to become a mystery box. We don't know what it is yet, but it is something, and we have 12 of them. All told, 12 of this number gives me negative 144. So the question then is, how do we isolate the variable in this case? How do we leave the variable alone on one side of the equation? Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can figure out how we do that. You should have a pretty good idea after looking at the addition and subtraction video, but if we're multiplying this number by 12, how do we leave it alone? How do we find out what the number is if we know that 12 times this number is negative 144? Well, as I said, from looking at the video lesson before, you should have come up with the idea that we should divide by 12. We know that 12 times this number is something, so let's divide it by 12 and we have the number itself. Now, just like in the other video where we had a plus 12 minus 12, addition and subtraction were called inverse operations. They undo each other. The same thing is true of multiplication and division. They undo each other. But while in addition and subtraction this gave us a 0, in multiplication and division it gives us something different. 12 divided by 12 is 1. So instead of having 0 boxes left, we have 1 box left. And we go through with the rest of the solving of the equation. 12 divided by 12 is 1, so the 1 box is left on this side. I'll draw it here before I move to the next screen. And finally, we have negative 144 divided by 12. Now, if you need to review the rules for multiplying and dividing with negative and positive integers, go ahead and do that. There's a video lesson on that. Otherwise, negative 144 divided by 12 is just 144 divided by 12, which is 12, with the rule for negative numbers. One number is negative, one number is positive, so the answer is negative. Our mystery number is negative 12. So go ahead now and pause the video and see what you can do with this equation now that has division. Remember that multiplication and division are inverse operations, so they undo each other. How do we figure out what x is when we know that x divided by 5 is equal to 0.75, equal to 75 hundredths? Well, we have x over 5 is 0.75. We know that to undo division, we have to multiply. So we multiply the right-hand side to get rid of the 5, which means we have to, multiply the left-hand side by 5 to get rid of the 5 at the bottom of the fraction. So we have to multiply both sides by 5 to keep the equation in balance. These two 5s cancel each other out. It's like saying x divided by 5 times 5, which just leaves us with x. And now 0.75 times 5, you can go through the decimal multiplication on your own. That gives us 3 and 75 hundredths. So x is equal to 3 and 3/4, 3 and 75 hundredths. Now, using those skills that you have, go ahead and see what you can do with these 4 questions. 1, 2, and 4. Well, for number 1, we have 17x equals 323, so we have to divide both sides by 17 because x is multiplied by 17, and we're going to undo that multiplication. Divided by 17, divided by 17, x is equal to 19. For number 2, we have x divided by negative 3 equals 11. So now we have to multiply both sides by negative 3. That cancels these out. Multiply this side by negative 3 because we have to keep the equation in balance. X left alone on the left-hand side is equal to a negative 11 times 3, which is negative 33. For number 3, we see that now x is multiplied by negative 6/10, which means we have to divide by that same thing, including the negative 6/10. Divide the right-hand side now by negative 6/10, so that we keep everything in balance. 6/10 divided by 6/10 is 1. The negatives cancel out too, so this is now x. And 1.8, divided by negative 6/10 gives us a negative 3. Go ahead and verify that decimal division for yourself. And finally, x divided by 4, written a different way, equals 1/16. We know in this case we have to multiply by 4 to get rid of the division by 4. These two 4's cancel, we get x. On the right-hand side, we get 1/16 times 4 over 1. We can do our fraction multiplication. This is a 1. This is 4. Now we have 1/4. X equals 1/4. So again, just like addition or subtraction, in order to solve an equation that has multiplication or division in it as its only operation, all we do is the opposite operation, the inverse operation. And as long as we multiply or divide both sides by the same number, we will keep that multiplication scale or division scale in balance.